Okay, guys, just say something right up the bat. Are you rolling? So you should know that the genesis of the book is I had me, 2 chiefs of staff, a prominent lawyer in Indianapolis who I did pretty well. We're having a beer after a round of golf at Chatham Hills. And they said, we should write down what we did. And the reason they said that is the 2 chiefs of staff and my other 2 chiefs of staff also had worked for previous administrations, previous office holders, and they were very open about the fact that what we did and how we did it and why we did it was a lot different than anybody else ever did it, any other office holder that they did. So that was, at the time I was writing another book on energy. I put that book away and started doing this. And so it took me 2 years to put it on paper, do a lot of research, make sure it was right. Had a lot of people read different parts of it, some all of it. And then I went through the editing process with IU Press. Sorry about that, but it was IU Press. So I'd done a book with them before. So that was the genesis of the book. Okay, I'm good to go.
Greg or Mayor?
Greg.
Okay, you can call me Jay. Thanks so much again for visiting us at Purdue. You gotta get in the habit of that. Come up with
I like coming to Purdue.
Let me just begin by telling everybody. Okay, so Greg spends. Well, you make many references to our former president, Mitch Daniels, the former governor. He's, I take it, one of your heroes or mentors.
He's an impressive.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, the person hosting this event is a professor in the Brian Lamb School of Communication. And Brian Lamb, I would say, is somebody that I think we can all emulate. You know, he's made huge contributions as well.
Right.
And I'm particularly a fan of the book talk format that he designed. And so
I don't know what that is, so am I okay here?
well, C-SPAN, I'm just trying to give my own sort of shout out, and so this not going to be super formal or anything like that. And Brian is always good with asking very simple questions. How long, how many words per day did you write? These kinds of questions. I won't ask that.
You can ask me anything. I'm open to all of it. I'm pretty honest about all of it.
But let me just end. I mean, okay, so I come from the world of political science too, and so the policy discussions, the politics, the parties and all that, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great to talk about. But I'd like to start something, maybe on a more personal way. You're very personally revealing. Tell a story. He says an awful lot about his upbringing, growing up, youngest, right, of 4 boys.
Yeah, my sister came along 11 years after me, but there were 4 of us in like a 6-year period.
Okay, and you talk about the family dynamics, and some of it was challenging, like all families, and your own impressions of your family, I think, changed. You're kind of, you go into great detail. You speak a lot about your own kind of ways that you prepped up for the campaign, and you had these affirmations that you used, like a few minutes before the debate. You would tell good things to yourself about your performance and what it was you're doing. And so I get a real good sense of kind of who you are, and I think you want the reader to get that.
I do.
And at the same time, you're saying, I'm an introvert. And you say that repeatedly in the book. So I guess the question is, what's it like for an introvert to write a book that is so personally kind of candid and out there?
Well, writers tend to be introverts anyway, so in that regard. I really did it for 2 reasons, honestly. And the first draft, how it came out is completely different than how I started to work. I mean, those first few pages I wrote on the first draft are nowhere in the book, not even close. But I sent it to my son early on, and I thought I had a pretty good first draft, and my son, who's a screenwriter out in LA, said, "Dad, you got 4 books in there." Whoa! So that, I kind of knew that on some level, so I went back to it, and I wanted to, it came down to 2 reasons, 2 books, if you will, which became a memoir. I wanted my kids to know about my upbringing and my time in the Marine Corps. They were there for the time in the Marine Corps, obviously. they weren't there for my upbringing. And parents don't usually talk to the kids about their upbringing too much. And so what I wrote about my upbringing kind of affected the kids quite a bit. And then the other part was I wanted to write down what the administration did and why we did it, not just what we did, how and why. I thought that was very cool. So that becomes a memoir. So actually the introverted part of it made a lot of sense to me because there was no other way I was going to get it out because I wasn't going to talk about it. So writing about it made a lot of sense to me. And I think it worked out pretty well.
And it's interesting. I think, to your point, I think writers do have a tendency to be a little introverted or comfortable in their own space. Well, let me, maybe moving on to, I guess this is partly personal, but it really has to do with policy. But to kind of start at the end, the last sentence says, I am not hopeful. Now, the context, I'm not hopeful about the Republican Party sort of changing its tune.
About one thing, which is I'm not
Yeah.
hopeful that there are going to be Republicans in urban areas anytime soon,
Yeah.
which that refers to. Because I don't think the party still understands people in urban centers. They don't understand people in cities. And they made a calculation to focus on suburban and rural areas to get elected to those offices. My point, as I say in the book, is if they would focus a little bit more on people in urban areas, people in cities, I think winning elections overall might be a lot easier, but they made the calculation that they don't want to go in that direction.
Well, I feel you're right, and I'm with you on wishing it were otherwise. And we'll talk more about that and the extent to which we can trust James Madison, because you would probably be the classical political theorists in here. But let me just stay on hope. Okay, so you're not particularly hopeful there, but what can you tell, say, people here or students you might meet at Purdue? It seems like hopelessness is not uncommon when you talk, or cynicism, or
I am actually very,
fatalism. So I was going to ask you, tell me, what's your response to it?
I'm actually very optimistic about the future, and I always have been. I think the world is better than it's ever been. It's getting better. If you look at just raw statistics on any number of levels, especially medical, combat deaths, disease, all those things are all trending in the right direction. Nutrition, all of that. So I'm very optimistic about that. I'm optimistic about the country. I'm not optimistic in the short term that, like I said, Republicans are going to understand people in cities. I'm not optimistic about that in the near term. I'm hoping that they get there because I'm old enough now to know so many things are cyclical, and hopefully that will turn around once again. But overall, I'm actually really optimistic. I'm not one of those guys who think the world's falling apart at all. I'm just the opposite of that.
Well, that's good to hear. I'll put a little elaboration. So one of the things at Purdue we just did a couple of years ago is every student, even if you come from another country, every student, undergraduate, needs to get a certificate and test in civics literacy. Okay? And other schools do this now too. But there's this notion that, as educators, we really owe it to the students to introduce them to civics and political processes and so on, and make them more mindful of that part of life. So we're doing our part to try and instill that sense. What would you tell somebody? Like, I have conversations with students who want to go into public service. I talked to one of our grad students a few months ago who wants to run for Congress. Okay, what would you tell them?
Do it, but know what you're going into. I found out during this time there are an enormous number of highly qualified, very intellectual Democrats and Republicans who are in the background who want to help the candidate. Both sides have that. Those people will not run. They don't want to run. They don't want to interfere with their family. They don't want to be in the public eye. They don't want to do this for this reason, but they want to help. And they're there in rather large numbers. And I would suggest to particularly men and women in college that you need to think about running for office, because we need good men and women to run for office, and not just be one of the backbenchers. I hate to say backbenchers because a lot of them are very influential, but just don't be behind the scenes. Sometimes it's okay for you to be out in front of the scenes. It's a whole different skill set than what you're going to learn in those places, but it's a skill set that can be learned.
Well, can you talk a little bit about your own election? You know, informally we were talking about that before, but say a little bit about how you did that first election, because that was kind of a nail biter. That was an interesting chapter in there. And talk a little bit about it, and maybe is this something you would recommend to any of these other people you advise?
Well, when somebody comes up to me and says, I want to run for office, my first question is, are you nuts? So that's really what the first thing I say. But then I actually say to them, no, that's a really good idea. Maybe you should do that. I would tell people to really look at it. How's it going to affect your family? How's it going to affect you in the future? What about your reputation? Because it's going to take hit in the short term along the way. It tends to work out in the long run, even if you lose, actually. But how's it going to affect everybody around you, and why are you doing it? Mitch was great, and it's in the book. A phrase that Stacy and Kristen know well. We need people in office who want to do something, not who want to be something. We have too many people who are running for office who want to be somebody, and that's not what we want. We need to do something to move the city, the state, the country forward with their ideas. And I think that's a really important point. I hope I got that across in the book, because I want good people to run for office, and too many times that's not happening.
Well, here's what you didn't do. It doesn't seem like you spent a lot of time fundraising in that first election.
I tried to.
It doesn't sound like you did a whole. Here's what I'm going with this. When people talk to me about running for office, they say, "Oh, but my God, I could never go out and talk to people and try and get all their money or something." Okay, well you seem to have avoided a lot of that, or people came to you. At least that's the impression I get. How did you do that?
The first time and the second time are completely different, because the company has enormous advantages and people know you, right? So, but the first time I was supposed to lose by 30 to 40 points. I knew that going forward. I was the candidate on our side who could walk and chew down at the same time. So that was some benefit, but it didn't mean I was going to win in a Democratic city. It didn't mean that at all. But I learned some stuff. I'm still learning things as we speak. But the one thing that really changed for me was being an introvert. I never, ever went up to a person I did not know and started a conversation. That was not something I ever did, because I thought people don't want to be bothered. Why would they want to talk to me? All that was in my mind. I didn't think it was necessarily a bad thing. I thought that's just how everybody was. My campaign manager in the summer of '07 told me, there's a group of people over there, go talk to them. And she was rather adamant about it at that time. It was at a festival, one of the Catholic festivals all over Indianapolis during the summer. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know how to do this. Thank God my wife was with me, so we could suffer this thing together. But I was shocked to find out that pretty much everybody wanted to say hi and talk to me. And so I went around to probably 100 to 150 people at that festival that were sitting at the tables. Almost everyone was happy that I could come and say hi to them. And it shocked me. It actually shocked me. So today I can walk down this hall, I'm going to see somebody, I'll say, who are you? What are you doing here? And in a nice way, and start up a conversation. I can do that now, and I like doing it. I've done it all around the world now, and it's really a lot of fun to do that. But until I'm in my 50s at this point in time, early 50s. Until that time, I had never done that. But now it's a wonderful thing to know that everybody kind of wants to talk to you. Everybody kind of wants to converse and socialize together, especially for somebody who's running for office.
Okay, so it sounds like that was, for starters, when you were just getting your sea legs there on this. The fact that you weren't, overly assertive, not too extroverted, so I'm hearing you right, you're saying that was actually part of the success rate in the campaign.
Yes, I think it made me a better person, frankly, to go through all that. It really did. The other thing, but we did find out in the fundraising aspect of this, I could call them up. And they gave me a list. I mean, everybody has a list, right? So you can call this up, or you can do whatever you want, however you want to say this. But if you're expected to lose by 30 to 40 points, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, people don't want to give you money because they don't want their money wasted. They worked hard for their money. They don't want to give you money because you're going to lose by 30 points. And so I put up with a lot of that throughout the way, and I figured out very quickly that even though my campaign manager wanted me to making phone calls did nothing. And so we had to switch strategies somewhere in there, and actually switch campaign managers too. But and I started going to events. I started going to festivals more. I started going to breakfast business meetings. I started talking to neighborhood groups, and I did that all the time. And it's a very tiring way of campaigning because no one's going to answer my call. No one's going to give you this. There are a few people here and there that did, but it was minimal, I have to say the least. My campaign, my opponent had $4 million in the bank. At most, I had $200,000, and that was the last 2 weeks of the campaign. A month ago, at most, I had $50,000 in my campaign, and he spent $4 million. That's what I was up against. But I knocked on doors. I had talked to neighborhood groups. I talked to business groups. I went to lunch, dinners. I did this, the land use meetings. I went to everything I possibly could.
Bless you for going to this land. Yeah, somebody who was on a committee for 4 years.
Not the most exciting thing in the world, but I did it, and but it worked for me because when you do that, even though you're expected to lose by 30 points, they kind of tell the next person, like, he actually came and sat through our meeting and was trying to learn. So on some level, when it started to turn, I think that kind of played out a little bit. But I had, by the time they realized they were in trouble, I hadn't talked to everybody in Indianapolis, but I had kind of touched almost everybody in Indianapolis, either directly or through a friend or something. So there was a lot of that was going on out there. So, and then it's funny how it turned out. When people think you might win, now money starts to show up a little bit, right? But I never got close to $4 million. I never got $250,000. So, I still was able to do this. But so you learn all those dynamics. So the social aspect of it, about meeting people, I think was very beneficial to me. Finding out that no matter what party you are, no one's going to give you money if you're expected to lose. Just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, so an awful lot of things were back for you. And I must say, to hear you describe it now, and you're elaborating on some of the points in the book, but this is interesting to hear. It sounds like the way somebody, when they're a little child, might learn about democracy, right? Or when you talk to these people. So it sounds unusual. In a sense, given the way campaigns are practiced these days. It's just it's remarkable that you came in, and you had a break as well with 4 debates.
I know.
Okay. So that's another unusual thing. A challenger who's expected to be down, is asked to participate in 4 different debate events. So something went wrong on their end, I suppose.
Maybe they thought they saw it trending. So first of all, we were in the context of the property tax crisis, which funny we just went through that. I thought we solved that like 10 years ago when I was running for mayor in 2007. So a little bit longer than that. And then they raised income taxes 65% 3 months before the election, which told you something, which means they thought they were in like Flynn. They were there. Right? They weren't. And so that's the context of all this. And so maybe they gave me 4 debates. And listen, my opponent he's a great guy, wonderful guy actually. maybe they sensed something's happening and they wanted to get out. Maybe they thought I would not perform well or something like that. But the truth is, most of Indianapolis did not know my name. And he just gave me 4 opportunities on TV for somebody to know my name. And so I think that helped out quite a bit. I was surprised they gave us 40 minutes.
Well, now, how much, in addition to the affirmations, telling yourself, yeah, I can do this, I got this.
No one ever knew that. It's the first time I've ever stolen
I gotta say,
anybody.
the whole world knows it.
The whole world knows it now.
Okay, but, no, and that's interesting because, actually, I've heard other people say that they don't often talk openly about it, but students on their way to the tests or other high-stress kinds of.
I wish I could use them effectively for my golf game, but I haven't done that.
Well, no, but that was interesting. What other, you didn't say very much more about your other prep, but surely you must have really hit the books or studied a lot. What kind of prep did you do?
Well, I was reading a lot about the issues for cities. I had a lot of people around me who had worked in previous mayoral administrations, so I talked to them quite a bit, what it was like, what should I expect, what's going to happen here or there. Primary one being Joe Loftus, who's the deputy mayor for Mayor Steve Goldsmith. And so he gave me a lot of information about being in office and what was like. This is in June. This is like 5 months before the election. I'm still down by 30 in June, but I'm actually talking to Joe and to others about what this is going to look like. So there was a lot of prep in that way.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. You know, you would be considered, and this is not meant to be a pejorative term, in the political science research literature, for people who study elections and campaigns and outcomes, they have this concept called the amateur candidate. Okay? And it's somebody who has never run for elected office before, okay? Who you know, has some of the profound characteristics, doesn't do much fundraising and this kind of thing. And so I just have to think, and you're coming out of a previous career that is wildly, you know, you want to draw some commonalities between military service and political leadership. Okay? We can talk more about that. But at the end of the day, you know, like General Eisenhower had to figure out quickly, right? I mean, these are different worlds. And so the learning curve must have been pretty steep.
It actually was, but the good thing is I learned pretty quickly and at that time, and it was a lot different. It was a lot different. And nobody knew me in the city. I had my family and I had my brothers that were living in the city. Other than that, and my sister. But other than that, no one knew who I was. Neither political party knew who I was. No fundraising. I didn't know who the law firms were in the city. It was just kind of a standard thing for candidates to know, right? I didn't know who they were. I just didn't know anything about this. I did think about running for Congress maybe a couple years before, but I didn't necessarily think I was going to get there. I was missing being part of something bigger than myself, which I did in the Marine Corps. So I had an urge to go do something, but then these two gentlemen asked me, look at this. I said, are you sure? It went that way eventually. But amateur candidate is beat.
So you're embracing that.
Well, I gotta say, I'm pretty candid about that. I was part of the amateur's reputation went to a global church early on. It really was. But I think I learned pretty quickly. By the time the primary hit May, I think I was, we were still down, obviously. But when I say it, we had no polling, we had no money. They had money, but I'm sure I was still on 30 or 40 points at that point in time. But I was speaking out pretty quickly, and I could handle one interview for TV pretty well.
Well, yeah, about your military service, you do speak an awful lot. Not only you describe those years in your memoir, but the sort of spillover or the relationship between what you learned there and how you carried yourself there, and what that meant when you took on this new administrative political role. What are a couple, if you could speak a little bit about, what are some of the main lessons that you took away from that part of your life and tried to adapt?
There's several. I tried to relate all the Marine career to what it meant to be the mayor. I tried to relate all that up. So I think every story in the Marines related to something as the mayor. But there's a couple things that are very important. The first one is focus. get very focused on missions in the Marines, in the military. This is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to do. Let's not get distracted over here and here. And in politics, people are trying to distract you every day of the week. I had people following me around with cameras and trying to distract me. I had people trying to do this and put me out my game, ask me silly things, and try to put me off. And so, but I was able to focus. This is where we're going. This is what we're trying to do. And let's just stay on this. And I think I was pretty good about that for 6, 7 months of this. Where I stayed. This is what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else. This is what I'm doing. I'm not going. This is not relevant. I had lots of people come in and say, if you go talk to this group over here, you're going to get all their votes. Well, all those votes were 4 votes, and I was going to get them anyway. So I got to go over here to do that? You have to weigh those things. I learned that pretty quickly, so that I stay focused on what we're trying to do. Just like I said during the Super Bowl in that chapter, the audience is not the NFL staff. It's not the press. The audience is 32 owners. When I was running for mayor, my audience was the citizens. It wasn't anything else. It was the citizens. And I stayed focused on what they were thinking and what they were saying, because I was talking to thousands of people over a period of time. And I was listening to what they were saying. And what became my campaign talking points eventually was just what I was hearing in the neighborhood meetings. I was just reiterating that, putting in different words. That was what I was saying. And I think that played really well. The leadership aspect is also important to the military. Important. It was very important to me. This is what we're trying to do. One of the things in my leadership book that I wrote, I say everybody wants to be on a good team. Nobody joins an organization. Nobody came to Purdue saying, "Gee, I really hope Purdue is terrible." Nobody really does that, right? You come to the team hoping it's going to be a good team. And I think I tried to do that during the campaign as much as I could, but certainly when I was the mayor, that played a big part. That my administration, people in the administration, they want to be on a good team, and we can make sure that happens. And then the other thing is, people want to live in a good city. I want to make this the best city that I can, and people appreciate it.
Well, it sounds like that style. Okay, so the way you ended up living and the way you carried yourself, it sounds like that's what you took with you when you were actually doing the job. And here I'm thinking, you spend a good amount of time a little bit later in the book talking about all the international connections, all of the efforts to bring business firms and manufacturing and so on. And, it's lots. There's an awful lot there. You can just go on and on talking about it. But it seems like it's sort of like whatever skills you sort of cultivated, talking with people and Meridian, clubs or something like that, right?
Right.
The locals, right? You kind of took that with you when you go to Japan on some mission or something. Is that fair to say?
It is, but again, who's your audience? The audience, the citizens of Indianapolis want to hear public safety, they want to hear budgets, and they want to hear infrastructure, and they want to hear about education, even though you may not own it. In Indianapolis, you do own it a little bit, as opposed to in the country. But those are things people want to hear about. They don't want to hear about that you're going to create a sister city in China or India. It's just not part of it. I thought that was important for the global economy. I thought it was important for Indianapolis to get more involved in international business. I knew I was going to do that, but that's not necessarily what you want on the campaign, right? Because you can do that when you're in your office. And I don't think that's deceptive. It's just that people are focused on public safety, infrastructure, budget, and education in a city. That's pretty much every city campaign in the country. So you focus on those things and you talk about those things. There are lots of things I did. I created the Office of Sustainability. Who saw that coming, right? But it needed to be done. So there are things like that you can do once you're in office, but people are going to build on those 4 things in the city primarily. So that's kind of what we focused on. The international piece I thought was really important because the global economy, I don't know how many times I said it in neighborhood groups. I wasn't shying away from it at all. That our competitors are not necessarily Kansas City or Nashville. It's Auckland, New Zealand, and Stockholm, Sweden, and other places. That's capital, and labor is mobile now. And so we have to make sure that people see Indianapolis as a place to come to. we can say what we want about Indianapolis, we love it, we love the state of Indiana, but outside of LA and New York, the rest of the world doesn't know much of America. And if you're from Kansas City or from Nashville, you got to go tell them why. So we went and told them, and that's what we did. And I think it had some effect on it. Certainly, the state picked up on it. I say in there at one point, the state followed me on like these 5 or 6 things. One of them was India, because I went to India, created a sister city in Hyderabad, which is their IT and pharmaceutical capital in India. And next thing you know, the state is going to India quite a bit. And there's at least 3 cities that have companies that have come from India and opened up in the state of Indiana. So I think it's had some effect on that. But I saw that differently from my time in the Marine Corps, because we lived overseas. And I knew about those things. People always worry about there's going to be this junk of it doing this, but that is rarely really true. Most of those things are pretty busy. There are some ceremonial things that go along with it, because the rest of the world does ceremonial things more than America does. And so you have this event, this event, this event.
Well, you also said too, a private funding for the
right. It was all private funding.
Yeah.
It was all private funding, right? It was no taxpayer dollar involved.
Yeah.
The people who went with us paid for being willing to go. That was just part of it. It was perfectly legal. It was all fine.
Yeah. Well, let me circle back for a second to the focus idea. Okay. And one of the things that you wrote that struck me is when you were making decisions and thinking about policy, you tried to think in terms of 10 to 15 years. What's going to be the state of the world? That's our goal.
Right.
Okay. And that got me thinking that, all people in public life have this, all students thinking. We all think in terms of temporal units. For the student, it's the semester. For the elected member of the U.S. House, it's 2-year intervals. For the senator, it's 6 years. Everybody thinks in time. And you're thinking in time 10 to 15 years. That strikes me as being really advantageous, really, in the larger public interest. But that's not, I can't imagine. Did you meet many other people who thought that way?
Virtually none.
Yeah.
Virtually none. Because they're worried about the next election.
Well, that's.
And I really wasn't.
Yeah.
I really wasn't worried about the next election. The funny thing is that sort of attitude, that the way we did business, looking out long-term interests of the city, that played really well. And what I would explain to neighborhood groups that we're doing this because this is what I think the world's going to look like, or the state's going to look like. They got that. So I think they trusted us. But I knew I had a re-election coming up, but it goes back to the Marine Corps. What's the right thing to do? What are we trying to get to? And that's what I try to do. I knew the election coming up. You have to go through this political cycle, which is, and I'm not sure there's one adjective to describe the political cycle, but you have to go through it to do these other things. And so I was willing to go through that to do these other things for the long-term health of the city. And everything we did was for the long-term health of the city. There's no question about that. And how we position the city in the right way. But I just thought like that, generally speaking, second time around, where I have to think about the next election. I had people around me who could do it at that time, where I didn't have to. I had to show up and shoot the commercials and things like that, but I had people around me.
Well, that's sort of forward thinking.
Right.
It seems rather rare.
I wish it wasn't, but
Yeah.
I would agree with you that it is.
Yeah. And, well, at the same time, your sort of generosity towards other people comes across. So even if folks are acting in a more self-interested way or in ways that you think are counterproductive, you're not calling them out. Some memoirs like to settle scores or something, right? But you're absolutely not doing that. You're saying, in case in point, and we'll get to this in a second, the whole religious freedom controversy, and your kind of later months and years where things got very, more polarizing for you. But in that context, you're saying that Mike Pence is one of the nicest guys you know.
He's the nicest guy in politics I know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, so I just, can you talk a little bit about, because that seems like another rarity.
Well, and now to be fair, I'm going to be honest about this. I had 2 other chapters of that book. And one was fluff, kind of like, I love the articles written about me at the end, and how you press it, knock that out. And then I had other anecdotes, and some of them were kind of funny, like the Bobby Knight stories, this trip over here, and this trip over here, and this is funny, and things like that. And in that, I had like 5 or 6 kind of what I consider funny things at this point in time about the Democrats, and I took them all out. They weren't real shots to me; they were kind of funny. But I never really went after them saying they were silly or stupid. I didn't come anywhere close to that anyway. But they knocked out 2 chapters. I had 145,000 words. They said we want a 120,000 word book. And by the way, these 2 chapters are 25,000 words. So they knocked these 2 chapters out. I actually put a couple anecdotes back into the guts of the book, so a couple of made it back in there. But I think it served me well to just kind of keep it on what we were trying to do. And like I say, I assume you're going to talk about the Religious Freedom Act here shortly. Anyway.
Next thing on my agenda.
Go ahead.
This is interesting here because I was going to ask you. So the being an introvert might have been part of the secret success story. Okay, but I'm also thinking maybe the sort of generosity or the deference to others, even if you disagree with them. By all appearances, trying to think the better of them, or calling them out. Okay, is that, that speaks well of anybody as a person, but is it also kind of useful, practically?
Is it practical?
Yeah. On a day-to-day, do you get more done that way? And
well, I was not younger at this point. I'm in my 50s when so I kind of knew at that point in time that if you're trying to focus and you're trying to get these things done, and if you're going to knock this person over here, then they're not going to be for you there later on. And you might need them. Then that doesn't make any sense to me. I'd already known that on some level. So I did, especially going after people publicly. I don't rarely do I go after anybody publicly. I don't think personally at all, ever. And there was one particular instance, I won't say it specifically, but there was an instance where somebody wanted me to go after an individual who everybody went after very publicly. And my communications guy at the time says, Mayor, you probably should say something about this. And I said, no, I'm not going to. I said, the last thing he needs is his 2 kids in school reading about their dad and comment from the mayor. I said, so I'm just not going to do it. And he was shocked that I said that, but that was the way I was. I didn't want his kids. He had 2 little kids in elementary school, and the last thing he needed was a comment from the mayor about what he did. So I refused to comment. So I think that's kind of how we did it. You don't really move things along. You're just knocking them down. Again, strange in politics today, but that's just not how me or my administration is built.
Yeah, no, that's, you're right, I would agree that it is uncommon. At the same time, I think, I can see a very pragmatic justification for, if you want to move the ball forward.
It is, but I'd like to think it was the right thing to do too.
No, absolutely. I'm just saying, how are you going to tell the other people? Yeah, look, when you think about it, this could be in your interest, right? To follow this style. But okay, so let's talk about the religious freedom.
Did you like the chapter?
That was an interesting chapter. Yes. Those of you that haven't read the book, yeah. I'm not saying you shouldn't start from the beginning, but if you want to kind of, maybe read it backwards a little bit. At least for me, anyway. It's I perked up when I read that, and maybe because it's also so much more recent. Yeah, it seems like it was 10 years ago, but only thereabouts. But
still playing out.
And maybe cranked up, a bit more. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that.
It was, as I say, it's the most difficult 10 days I had in administration. 4 months prior, I already announced I was not going to run again. And I mean, there's a whole story. I'm in Florida on vacation. I rarely took vacations out of the state because I just kind of want to stay close to home. But I finally took one, and then all of a sudden I'm hearing we're going to pass this bill And over this period, that first Wednesday, I'm actually in Florida with Winnie, and I get a phone call from my communications lady at that time, says, if you don't put out a press release today, we are going to lose Gen Con, our biggest convention. So we put that out that day. And Thursday morning, I'm in the South Florida. Thursday morning, Lady and I are driving back to the state. We started like at 10 a.m. and we got back at 2 a.m. on Friday. And at 10 a.m. in the governor's office, not with the governor, not with the governor. And it was clear to the two people that I knew them well, they were friends of mine, it was pretty clear they had no clue what they had just done. Didn't have a clue. And that was disturbing, to say the least, because what they had passed, they did not know what they passed. I know this is going to be shocking to a lot of people, but legislatures don't know everything about everything. They usually know 2 or 3 different areas well, and then they leave it to other people to tell them, shall they vote yes or no? So on this one, the people who put this forward knew what they were doing. They told the rest of the legislators, it's about this, and they passed it. But when they passed that law, which Pence said was exactly the same law that Bill Clinton passed at the federal level in '92, that's a yes and no answer, actually. When you combine it with the rest of the Indiana code, it was clear discrimination against gay people. And it became a very difficult period, to say the least. Because the people, I was the most prominent Republican in the state who called them out, and I had to do it. This is not something you can delegate. Sometimes there are things you have to do. And I'm calling out my friends on national TV. Very hard thing to do. But most of them didn't even know what they did. And it wasn't until about Tuesday or Wednesday of the next week that they realized, oh my God, we really screwed this up. And as I hate to say typical, but they didn't rescind the law. They actually passed another law that kind of negated the effects of the original law. So they can say they voted for it, and then the other side they can say, well, see, it didn't have an effect. So a little deceptive maybe, but that's how they work. It is what it is at this point in time. But it was so hard to do that. But it goes back to, again, what's the right thing to do? And I think history will judge me very kindly on what I did. But it was so hard to go through that.
Well, you also, in that same kind of the concluding chapters, there's a lot there going on as you're thinking about the state of your administration and party politics and everything. So there's not only religious freedom, but you talk about your commitment to clean energy. You talk about your support for multiculturalism and public education. Earlier in the book, one of the things that caught my eye is you talked about, how much you supported the guardian ad litem and child support services and so on. So you're doing all of these things that, as your administration is coming to a close, you can kind of see kind of the pendulum turning. And I'm reading, you're not very emphatic in the writing, but you are dissatisfied. You're feeling kind of unhappy with the way things are drifting.
I'm unhappy with how my party sees, that's not the right word, how they deal with and understand, or really don't understand, people in cities. The ethnicities that are involved, the communities that are involved, all of those things that go into that. Because cities have many different sub-communities, if you will, within the city. We always don't understand them very well. But I have great relations with all of them. I went to all the international events I possibly could. I really believe that this global economy, we need to understand it better, to compete more in it, but it's also the right thing to do. I think we're just all the same person, kind of grew up in different ways. And it goes back to the Marine thing also. The more we talk to each other, the less war there is. The more we trade with each other, the less war there is. And the last thing I want is for people to go to war. I've been to war. not necessarily a great thing to be going to, but I did it, and I did my duty, and I want less of that. I think the more we talk to each other across cultures and across nations, the more we trade with each other in the same way, I think the less opportunity there is for us to get into battle.
Well, and across party lines even too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. We're having a little trouble right now.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that because this goes back to gerrymandering and all those things. Just 40 years ago, I'm old enough to remember all this stuff. Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan got along pretty well. Tip O'Neill was Speaker of the House and Reagan was the president. They got along famously. Disagreed, and they went out and had dinner together. I think we can't do that now because if a Democrat or Republican went out to dinner in D.C. right now, somebody would take a picture and it'd be on both sides of blogs, and you'd be primary the next time. And that's gerrymandering, because the main election now is not November, it is now May. And if you do the wrong things, you can get beaten that way. And so frankly, that's what everybody's afraid of. And I had a congressman tell me just 2 weeks ago, the pressure to conform is enormous. I would suggest that's on both sides of the aisle. I'm hoping that goes away.
Well, so I think your partisanship still means a lot to you. I mean, case in point is the second word in your title.
Only because it conflicts with the first word. Urban and Republican are not the same. You don't envision the same thoughts.
Okay, so you're contrasting that.
Yeah, that's a contrast.
But I was going to ask you, have you thought about renouncing party politics or, I'm thinking there are many prominent figures out there, people, former elected officials, journalists, commentators, others, who, have tried to figure out how to respond to the climate because they're sort of coming from the spirit you're coming from. And so how are you managing that?
Well, I have people talking to me about that very subject routinely, but in Indiana, certainly central Indiana, people see me almost as nonpartisan right now anyway. So I think people understand that about me. So, excuse me. So I don't really have to go away from that necessarily. Again, I'm older, and I can see cyclical natures of things going on. Let's do here, just get this. So we may be able to get back to that. And I'm kind of a loyal guy. I've been married for 42 years. Was in the Marine Corps for 23 years. And served in the city for 8 years. I'm not one to kind of quit, take my ball and go home. It's just not kind of in my nature. I try to work it out within, if you will. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me right now. Will I say that forever? I don't know. I don't know if I say that forever, but right now I'm trying to do what I can from the party. People understand who I am, certainly in central Indiana. And so I'm blessed in that way. But would I ever go the other way? I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, in a second, I've got one last question to ask, but then maybe we can open it up for some general Q&A. Okay, so people, I'm sure, ask you every which way, what's the next thing? Because this is not, you're not done. I mean, I'm reading, you say you need a breather, and it seems like in reading the last segments here of the book, you kind of said no to a lot of things. What kinds of things are you thinking of saying yes to?
That's a really good point. I've had my breather, so that part is the only different part is the energy level, frankly, is not what it was. I could, frankly, even when I was 60, I felt like I was 30. I mean, I was still physically strong. I could go all day. 70 is a little different animal for me, to be frank with you. I thought about Congress. I'm in the 4th district now, and I thought about that. I'm not sure I'm going to go that way. But if I did run for Congress, I would certainly be saying different things than every other person in that Republican primary, and such as the debt, and what are we going to do here, and this, and how we interact with other nations and things like that. I'd be saying different things than what the party line is, no question about that. Which might actually work in primary, because if there's 4 people saying this and one person saying this guy might win. So,
So you've thought a little bit about that. It does,
Yeah.
it's an open primary.
it is an open primary, and so I thought about it, I'm not sure I'm going to go in that direction. I got people asking me to do things here and there, I'm on nonprofits, a few of them still. So I got a lot of work going in that direction. Would I ever fully go to work again? The answer to that is maybe, I'm not sure. It really have to be the right situation, but I think I can make a difference. I'm not going to go to work to go to work. I'm at the point now where I can kind of pick and choose. I'd like to see what they could do. Do I want to be a 73-year-old freshman in the U.S. House? Got to really think about those things. 2 a.m. votes, not my style. Not my style, but we'll see.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the demographics of the Congress, I don't know that you'd be radically out of place.
No, but I'd be out of place by, I would want to do what I think is right as opposed to trying to conform. There's a little bit of that I get, but lots of it I don't.
Well, why don't we, thanks for all of that. Why don't we open it up and covering the waterfront here in this map. It's actually a long book. So there's a lot that's been covered. What other things?
I can start. You once described yourself as a radical moderate. What does that mean to you?
That's a great question, because I am. I don't think either party is where they used to be. And so many things that Republicans are doing now used to be things that we used 40 years ago. We were criticizing Democrats about, and now we're doing those things. And the principles are not in place anymore. It's about issues, not just principles. Issues that can get you elected. So I kind of take what I like to say is the moderate. When I say principle, I mean what used to be. I'm kind of a founding father kind of guy. Mr. Madison, I'm reading the Federalist Papers as we speak right now. And I kind of believe in that stuff, and I think they kind of got it right. They got the words right. They didn't execute it the way they wrote it, but they got the words right, I think, generally speaking. But 80 years after that, here comes the Civil War, we got this. So the issues we're driving and the principles might have gone out of the way throughout, but I think now they're further away than they've ever been. So I think the moderate road, the principle road down the middle is the way to go. And it's a neat little phrase, radical moderate. It's kind of a neat little phrase, but that's my way of telling people that the people that are, a lot of people getting elected, they are kind of, they're not the people that we want to make decisions for us. They're making radical decisions based on ideology that make no sense and coming from both sides. So I think the moderate middle is actually where most people are. They just, because of the gerrymandering in the primary system, I think it's difficult to get in office. Yeah.
Please jump in.
I think my question was similar to what she asked, but more I was curious about considering you were a radical moderate. I don't know
I'm sorry, I can't.
So I'm thinking about your position as a radical moderate, and I was curious about the principles that you operated with when you were mayor of Indianapolis, and how much of that do you think is, you sort of answered that in response to that question, but I'm curious, how much of the principles that you work with would you say is still practical in today's political landscape, particularly in Indianapolis?
How many of the principles I used as mayor still apply?
Yeah.
I understand there's what I would call the federal way of thinking and the city way of thinking. So I think the city way of thinking still applies completely. Everything that I tried to do was to build a high quality life, to attract citizens, to attract people in. I'm very open about the main paradigm was attracting talent into the city. And that every decision made kind of went through that prism. And there's a reason for that, because the way, when I grew up, if somebody offered you a job, you went to the job. If it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you'd never been there in your life, you'd take the job in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's not what people do now. That's not what you do now. You go to where you want to live, you try to make it. So it's incumbent on, and then businesses go to where the talent is. Businesses don't go, as I said repeatedly in here, businesses do not go where the tax breaks are. It's a part of it, but they go where the talent is. Because if you can't get a workforce, the tax breaks don't make the thing. So you create the area, the city, that you want to live in, so businesses will come in and hire you. And that means lots of things that frankly my party doesn't even understand, like trails, parks, and ethnic festivals, things like that. So that's what I was doing. I think that will apply for cities for decades to come. That may switch at some point in time, but that was not true when I grew up. It is true now. And so that's what I did, try to do this way. The federal thing is you know, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was not necessarily thinking of those things. I was thinking about the Marine Corps, taking care of my family, raising my kids, those sorts of things. But when you get out, when I was done with that, then I started thinking of the federal principles a little bit more. I strongly believe in individual liberty and self-determination. I believe the government is there to help, but not to dominate, not to tell you what to do, things like that, that I think was incumbent on is what the founding fathers were trying to get to. So I believe in that stuff, and I want to get back to that. But as I say in the book at the very end, I believe in this, and this, but I said, I don't think most Republicans wouldn't even know what I'm talking about. This is what no. Neither would Democrats, though, to be fair. Neither would Democrats, because they're thinking about the issues. I said, well, no, wait a minute, maybe we should, if we're going to have this issue, maybe we should go, what does this principle say about this? And this has kept us in good stead for a long time, but if you're just going to throw those out to get elected the next cycle, I think that's a problem. And so going back to your civics, what you started with, maybe we teach things that what the country used to be. I watch way too many YouTube videos because I watch it almost every day now. They're so fun. And I watch them on all sorts of different subjects, but a lot of them is going to a college campus. I don't think this would happen at Purdue. But going to a college campus and they ask a student how many states are there, and they say 27. Things like that. So there's a lot of that stuff out there. But I think most college students probably do know the answer to that question. but they're getting the few they're doing. But that's the sort of thing that I think kind of doesn't necessarily bother me necessarily, but I think going back and reading the original words, because it's not like those people from 250 years ago. I mean, they were pretty smart people, and they had studied history back to Plato. And they kind of knew all of these things and tried to put them in a framework that would work for us, which became the Constitutional Republic. So I think they got a lot of that right. Circumstances change, certainly as technology changes and life improves and medical changes and all. So you get all that, but then most of the time you can go back to those things because how does this apply to this? Because I think they got a lot of that right. And I'm afraid that no one thinks like that anymore. And I'm probably, I don't know if I'm an island, but I'm pretty close to it.
When you were talking about being mayor, you were alluding to working with different kinds of groups within the city. And so if those groups were if they had conflicting ideals or they wanted different things, how did you as a leader sort of navigate that and come to a resolution if you have a lot of groups wanting different things?
That's a great question, but I would suggest to you that the ethnic communities in Indianapolis really never, I can't ever recall them conflicting. I think they all wanted to work, they wanted to be recognized, to be frank. They wanted to be seen as a part of the city. But other than that, I don't think they conflicted because they always came together at all these different events. And they kind of celebrated each other. So I don't think, it's not like this group was fighting this group, at least on a cultural basis, on an ethnic basis. That really never happened. There are people that had different opinions about what I should do with parks or with this or with that. I mean, that happened all the time. You just kind of work through that and listen to everybody. I think we were pretty good at listening. We had a mayor's night out every month, other than December. The first 4 years we did it every month except December. And we just listened to everybody. We just took questions and listened. And I I was very upfront about that. That's how I governed those first 4 years, was what I was hearing at the mayor's night out. It was not what was in the press. It was not what was in the headlines. It was not on TV. What I was hearing at those neighborhood meetings is what I was doing. Frankly, that really was. So I think a lot of that got washed out, if you will, at that point in time where people kind of got together. But there were particular points. Actually, the most contentious things were probably what I was trying to do in a couple parks. I wanted this, and they wanted that. You can't do this, and you can't do that. But we kind of figured it out. To be honest, I was the mayor, kind of fell my way. I'll give you one example. West Montgomery here. West Montgomery jazz guitars, very famous jazz guitarists from Indianapolis back in the 50s. Had a park that wasn't really working, had a pool that nobody attended, other than one lady brought her teenage kids from another area of the city there to swim one day, 1 month. Okay? She didn't want me to do anything with that park. But it was a terrible park. And so we decided to put a spray park in the shape of West Montgomery's guitar. And so we had very colorful guitar spray park in there. As soon as we put that in, kids came out of the neighborhood, parents came out and went to the park again. Did away with the pool. She was livid. I thought I was right. And I think it played out that way too. Those are the sorts of things. And to be frank with you, as the mayor, you got to be careful to not have the loud voice win. You got to have the majority voice win, not the loudest voice. And there's a lot of that goes on in cities and frankly in the nation also. The loud voices tend to get in, whereas the majority of people kind of want this. And I think we were proven right on that one for sure. The parks was probably the most contentious in this. People kind of, it's my park. It's very important to me, and I understood all that. I grew up in parks too. But the culture of the ethnic was really, they were kind of all together all the time, frankly. That was my take on it. Okay.
I think one thing I'm hearing throughout this whole session is like a desire to sort of share what you've learned in
Yes.
a way that's beneficial to others. Have you ever thought of taking to YouTube yourself?
Yes, I have. Now here's, this might go to energy level, it just might go to my personality. I'm not sure which applies here. I've had a YouTube channel for like 5 years. I haven't put a thing on it. I've had Substack for probably 3 or 4 months now. I haven't put a thing on it. I've got, at one time I had like 30 domain names. Now I think I got about 15 domain names, right? Kills my wife because she has to pay the bills, right? My wife gets all the money. It has for 40 years. So I don't necessarily get to it. There's a part of me that was going, I don't know anything about Instagram or TikTok. I think it's there. I kind of know it's there. I'm not sure the demographics and things like that. But I know YouTube kind of works. It really does. And we got time. We're okay on time here.
We got time.
I'm at breakfast the other day. Somebody who wants me to go down the middle. Okay, doing that sort of thing. And the waiter comes up to us, like a 25-year-old guy. And I'm in one guy who wants to start independence, another lady who's a Republican friend of mine. We had breakfast. The waiter comes up and says, I hear you guys talking political stuff. Can you tell me about Israel? And the other two said, well, we're kind of local. And then I popped up and said, why? We're doing this, this. And the other two were like, how did that happen? So there's part of me that wants to do that, to tell teenagers and maybe 20-year-olds, this is going to be okay. Because most of them think everything's falling apart, which is just the opposite of what is actually happening. And I kind of want to go on YouTube and tell them this. This is the history, because I'm old enough to know so much of this stuff and can remember the lessons of it all. So I want to go on and say, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here. So that I think might be effective. If my son would move back from LA, I think I'd be way more effective at it and get me to do these things. Because I think there's merit to that. That I like to think I think I'm I'm still working pretty well, and my mind is still working pretty well. I remember all of this stuff that I think is important, but it depresses me to see that the teenagers and the 20-somethings, maybe 30s, but probably 20s, thinking, this is not right, oh my God, what's happening? And actually, this is just a cycle we're going through. We've been through the Civil War, we lost 2% of the population in the Civil War, the equivalent of 7 million people in America alone. World War I, we lost 20 million people in the world. World War II, we lost 60 million people in the world. Is there anything like that on the horizon? No, not really. We got pockets here and there, but anything like that, where democracy actually was at risk in the 40s? There's nothing like that right now. Everything we're doing is kind of self-inflicted. That'll probably cycle itself out at some point in time. At least that's my opinion. And I kind of want to tell people that. I've said that at graduation ceremonies. I get asked to speak at graduation ceremonies, and I say that. And it's actually really well received. So the YouTube, I may do the YouTube thing. I've got a brand new Apple computer. I've got my office set up for it. I got the microphone. I've got it all, and I just haven't done it. So.
Well, this can be posted.
That's right.
Yeah, we could put this on there. That's right. But there's a part of me that wants to do that. There's this book. There's no question I wrote this book to pass on knowledge. That is absolutely the 100% complete truth. Not just to my kids, but to other people in the country. That this is at least where I am right now. This is my accumulated knowledge, and I'm going to pass that on. And how I and my team do business. This is dedicated to my 4 chiefs of staff because they kind of ran the city a lot of the times. They were very good, and they controlled so much of it. And my staff was incredible. I was so blessed with so many good people, but it all kind of worked. And so I want to pass on that knowledge in some way, somehow. And I think I can do more if I can just have my son come back and help me do it.
That's right.
Even my daughter can really get this stuff too. So, but I can't get to the point where I need about 5 technical points that I can't figure out. They could do it tomorrow.
Question.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing about your wonderful journey. So, as a former senior leader, what was your go-to way of influencing change and motivating people? Because I'm sure there are lots of people under you, and it's not always easy to influence people. So, I'd love to know what strategies you used to do that.
I mean, how could I pass that on, or what did I do?
What did you do, and how could you pass it on? Yeah.
Okay, now I'm getting embarrassed. I probably should do something about that, shouldn't I? But I was very fortunate. Amateurs is the right word for me to begin all this process, right? I mean, I was pretty smart in other ways doing this out of the Marine Corps. I think I raised 2 pretty good kids and had a great wife. And I'm very blessed in so many ways. But the last 20 years have been terrific for me. I mean, really, really good. And I've learned so much, but I can put what I've learned into historical context, if you will. And I think I do need to do more of that. I need to speak more. I need to talk more about this. The technology of getting that out is what I don't completely, I understand on a conceptual level. I don't really understand on a technical level. And that's what I need help with. And so that's what I want to do. But so the people I've been around for the last 20 years have been remarkable. And I'm really blessed. And they're out there doing their things. I have so many 30-year-olds in my administration. They're all now 40 and 50-year-olds, and you can't believe what they're doing. I mean, at the level that they're doing it. I had the State Civil Rights Commission. I got the president of a construction company. I got the president of an investment company. I had 2 people one that ran the IEDC. One was the number 2 person on there. The Hoosier Lottery director has been there for like 15 years. I got 4 people, don't get mad at me here. I got 4 people at IU, all vice president above or something like that. I mean, the CFO, external relations person there. It's just crazy. The one who runs all the campus infrastructure for all 8 campuses is crazy what they're doing, the levels that they're doing it. So I had all these people around me, and I was very blessed, and they made me a lot smarter too. So I've got to do something, obviously, to get the word out. I like to think we did things the right way, and I think probably will in this kind of a down cycle. And I think it's a down cycle, no question. But giving people a little bit of optimism, I think, would be beneficial. So I appreciate you saying that. I really do.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Why don't I tag on to that? I think we might be winding down, but, okay, related to what you've been saying, and really circling back to your point about 10 to 15 years, that should be our focal goal. Okay. Well, it's been about 10 or 15 years since you were in the administration. So as you look around now in Indianapolis and parts around that, and we're thinking what kind of longer term impact of decisions you made, what would be the top 3 or 4 or whatever things, the takeaways? What should be in the first paragraph when we're telling the story about?
Some are physical, some are not. The top one is always going to be, I think we enabled a new generation of leadership in the state. Because the people that I had with me were incredible, and everybody wanted them afterwards. My third chief of staff, Ryan Bond, who was previously the council president, became my third chief of staff. Brilliant guy, really savvy guy. And he came in to me one day and says, the sports corps wants me to lead them. Now, the sports corps in the state of Indiana is a big deal. And he'd been with me 2.5 years, and I said, Brian, I don't care what you say, you've got to take that job. You got to leave me and take that job. That's kind of what was happening. So it's a new generation of leadership that they're going to be around. That's the best thing I think we did, is enable this new generation of leadership. Are people that are now in their 40s and 50s largely, who are doing great things for the state of Indiana. I was blessed in that way. It's kind of funny because a few of them I took from Mitch's government administration to come to work for me, and then they went out and did all these marvelous things. The sewer work that's in the book pretty extensively. Took a $1.8 billion project, made it a $1 billion project, and made it better. People don't understand that. I never got news locally on it, except for one guy. It was kind of funny, but it was national news. It was national news. It wasn't local news. So I think that's going to keep us in good stead for a long time. We have a lot cleaner water for a long time. No one will talk about it because it's the one reporter actually did something on that, a little 5-minute vignette on it on Channel 6. He said, Mayor, nobody cares. Infrastructure is sexy. Nobody cares. So and he told that to me point blank. It was kind of funny. He's a funny guy anyway, but it was really true. So so there's a lot of things like that. I think trying to open up Indianapolis to be more global, I think, was a big part of it. Been tamped down, to be frank, a little bit right now, and I hope we get back to that. I think embracing all the different cultures. I like it when I'm in a downtown. I hear 20 different languages. I like that. Other people think that's terrible. I love it. I think it's a sign of a great city, frankly. That sort of thing matters to me. I think embracing clean energy is one of those long-term things that just, I think both sides have kind of gone the wrong side on that, the wrong way on that. Whereas this is really about us breathing our air, eating clean food, or breathing clean air. I think we ought to look at it from the citizen's viewpoint as opposed to any other viewpoint. And I think we get stuck in ideology as opposed to what's the right thing to do here. So I like that I embraced it. I like that I created the Office of Sustainability. It's kind of funny. There's an R behind my name, and I'm known as the Sustainability Mayor, which is kind of funny. Think about that. And I was also the only mayor that's ever been the Grand Marshal of the Pride Parade, which is hilarious when you think about that. So I'm kind of proud of all those things. There's something I think the infrastructure's gone by the wayside a little bit. I think there's different ways to do public safety. So that's what elections do. Elections have consequences, as they told me many times, and I've said many times. Elections have consequences, and people go in different directions. And that's just the way it is. That's America, and I'm fine with all that. But I think we put in this place of long-term things. The generation leadership, I think, the emphasis on clean energy and more global nature, and some of the physical work that we did, like the sewer, plus the parking meters, which was a huge success. Things like that, I think we will stay with us for a long time.
Well done. Why don't we, yeah, so Brett, you've probably all been wondering about all this food over here. Why don't, I think, right, Stacy, the room is here until about 4 o'clock. Yeah, it's yours, and we've got all this food. So why don't we just cut and change now into even less formal conversation?
Exactly. Wonderful job.
Yeah, if you don't take that, Chris is gonna have to